I decided to look at how people got to the West Coast from Chicago via train, obviously, because we're the Railway Historical Society, but also look at air versus bus and the car. Now we'll talk about the Milwaukee, because that was um, they were also running trains to Seattle. So the Milwaukee had the Columbian was kind of the secondary train. It left Chicago in the evening, arrived St. Paul in the morning, and went on to Seattle. The Olympian left Chicago in the afternoon, St. Paul in the evening, and then on to Seattle. And in '58, they actually shaved a little bit of time off, but it basically matched the speed of the Empire Builder. So that was pretty impressive. Now, the original paint scheme, as we remember, before 1955 was the orange and maroon. And this shows a couple of Westinghouse box cabs, passenger box cabs, pulling the Columbian out in western Montana under the wire. But in 1955, as we remember, Ben Heineman got involved with Chicago Northwestern, and he said, "Well, we're not going to haul those passenger trains anymore." So the Milwaukee picked up all the UP passenger trains from Chicago to Council Bluffs. And so as such, the Milwaukee painted all their passenger equipment basically in UP colors with just Milwaukee on the side. This is at Grand Crossing in La Crosse, and I'm standing on the Northwestern, and obviously the Hiawatha is on the Milwaukee, and the Burlington crosses right where you can see the top of the tower there. And here's a picture of it downtown La Crosse. So distance-wise, the Milwaukee was actually a little bit shorter, 2189, because they had a pretty direct route across Washington and fairly direct across Montana and everything. So about the same. The Columbian was 57 hours, which is about the same as the Great Northern secondary train was. But the Olympian was 45 hours. That's exactly what the Empire Builder was. And they actually shaved when the Great Northern shaved off some time off the in '58 off the Empire Builder. The Milwaukee matched it. So we'll talk about the Sioux line because they also did go to the West Coast. Now this is the Sioux Dominion leaving Chicago, and so it's behind one of their big mountain engines, and they had a fairly direct route. Later they advertised going. You can see the Northwestern when the Northwestern was still hauling the 400. Then later they changed it to the Milwaukee. So they advertised you take the Northwestern to St. Paul, and then you'd get on a Sioux Line train, and you'd go up through Enderlin and on to Minot and up to Portal, North Dakota. And then the CP had a connection train up to Moose Jaw, and then you got on the CP Dominion all the way to Vancouver. And then later they advertised, well, you just take the Milwaukee to Minneapolis. And so the Sioux Dominion left Chicago. You would take the 400 from Chicago to St. Paul, and then you arrived in Vancouver a couple days later in the morning. Then in the 50s, in the summer Sioux Line started advertising the Mountaineer, and that was they sped up the schedule quite a bit. And today Amtrak still advertises it. You take number 7 and then number 518. So you depart Chicago at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. You arrive in Seattle at 11:29 in the morning. The only problem is you have to wait until 6 p.m. To get the train to Vancouver. Now I imagine that's also because the train is probably often late because of the freight trains. So Amtrak, that's the Amtrak route, which is basically you take Amtrak to Seattle and then go up to Vancouver. So here's the Mountaineer in the picture from the internet at the Milwaukee Depot, and they were starting to change from F units to GP9s. The Sioux Line really liked the passenger GP9s, and so they were eventually had everything behind GP9s. The crews really liked them, and the maintenance and everything. It was more horsepower. So the Sioux Dominion, well, their mileage is not bad. It's 2210, and the Mountaineer was 2224. The Sioux Dominion was 68 hours to get to Vancouver, and via Portal, North Dakota. The Mountaineer was down to 57 hours. They had better connections. And Amtrak is still 57 hours. So, but that's still a viable way to get to Vancouver. I had to have one picture in here. This is that famous curve.
Moran's curve.
Lorenz curve. Okay.
Yep.
And it's it shows the Sioux Dominion, excuse me, the CP Dominion in the 50s. And many people say that the Canadian Rockies are the most beautiful mountains in the world. So, but anyway, if we look at all, go ahead. You have a comment? Oh, okay. This is all the routes. There was a lot of competition between Chicago and Seattle. So we talked about the Great Northern. That's the red line, and then the Northern Pacific is green. The Milwaukee is orange. And then, of course, there's also the UP. They had the city of Portland. And so they would go either the Northwestern or Milwaukee to Council Bluffs, and then they went straight across to Cheyenne, and then to Green River on the Union Pacific. And then they took the Oregon Trunk on the Union Pacific up through Boise, Pendleton, and to Portland, and then you went up to Seattle. And here's a picture of the city of Portland. They got engines were E2s. They were kind of a funny shaped nose, but 1,800 horsepower, and they had 3 of them on there. So this is all the UP city trains. They got to Council Bluffs on the Milwaukee or the Northwestern, and then they went straight west on the main line, and then the city of Portland went up to, as I said, up through Pocatello and Boise to Portland. And then the city of San Francisco went on the Southern Pacific over to Oakland. And then the city of Los Angeles went on the Los Angeles and Salt Lake, which was part of the UP. So if we look at all the different railroads, the Great Northern had number 31 in 1958. The Empire Builder. The Northern Pacific had the 25, which was the North Coast Limited. They were on a similar schedule. The Milwaukee Road had the Olympian Hiawatha, also on a similar schedule. The Milwaukee, in 1958, you took the Milwaukee to Council Bluffs, and then the UP on out to the city of Portland. Similar schedule. Now, Amtrak in 1978 was running the Amtrak Pioneer, and there you would go to Ogden on the city of San Francisco. Or I think they call it San Francisco Zephyr, and then you took the train, the Pioneer, from Ogden to Portland and Seattle, and then in the 60s, the UP started combining all of their trains into the city of everything, as they called it. From it left Chicago, and then they would divide it up in Cheyenne and Ogden and places like that. So they would run sections of it. So in terms of some of the details, Great Northern went 2210 miles. The Northern Pacific went 2319. Milwaukee was 2189. They're about the same. The Union Pacific was further because they had to go to Portland, and then you go straight north, so you don't get the advantage of the diagonal. Now today, or in 1978, Amtrak was 2666 because they had to go all the way to Ogden and then north. Now I'll talk about San Francisco. Now here are the choices to go from Chicago to San Francisco on the train. We talked about the UP, but there was also the California Zephyr. Now that took the Burlington, goes across southern Iowa, went to Omaha, and then Lincoln, and then on to Denver. And then at Denver, you would get on the Rio Grande and go all the way to Salt Lake City. And then the train would transfer to the Western Pacific, and the Western Pacific at that time was owned by the Rio Grande. So they would go, and the Western Pacific route had better grades, but it was further, so it was a little slower than the city of San Francisco. And then there was also Santa Fe had the San Francisco Chief. Now, if you see the dotted line there, and I'm going to talk about that, that's the main line passenger main line and the old main line of the Santa Fe. But the Santa Fe had built a more direct, lower grade freight line in the early 20s. And so then they routed the San Francisco chief as well as some of the trains that way. So here's a little bit more detail. The purple line is the old main line. That's where they used to run all the trains. It goes straight across Kansas to Dodge City, and then La Junta, Colorado, and then down over Glorieta Pass and Raton Pass to Albuquerque, and then it goes straight west. But as I said, in the 20s, there was somebody sitting in Chicago and said, you know, we got all those branch lines in southern Kansas. Why don't we kind of find a route and upgrade it down through Wichita, and we can cut across Oklahoma to Amarillo, and then we go straight west, and there's really only one grade, and that's Shattuck Hill in the panhandle of Oklahoma. And so they did that. And that, of course, has become now the double track Transcon that is 80 to 100 trains a day. That is the route, because the route the route coming through Colorado has those horrible grades with Glorieta and Raton Pass. Now they put the PAs, Alco PAs, which I guess is one of the favorites of rail fans, on the San Francisco chief. And Jim Boyd went in great detail about these things. Alco had come out with before the war, when General Motors came out with the E1, E2, E3, these twin engined units. They're like the units I showed earlier. And Alco came out with the DL109. If you remember that weird looking thing that had 3 windows in front, and it didn't sell very well. And so Alco said, well, after the war, they said, you know, we've got this. They were developing a new engine, the 244 engine. It was for February 1944 is when they started developing it. And so they were developing this engine. And then right after the war in 1946, they said, we're going to put that in this unit. It's 2,400 horsepower. It's only one engine. It's going to be really great. And the guys in the testing department said, hey, wait a minute, we're not done testing this thing yet. You've upgraded the horsepower quite a bit. We want to make sure this thing runs. Well, management made the decision to go ahead and put it in the unit. And Jim Boyd describes this in great detail. He said, oh, the PAs got out there and they ran and ran and ran. It was just great. Well, then all of a sudden, after about 3.5, 4 years, they all started having crankshaft problems. And that was a real blow because you know, you have crankshaft problems. Plus, it was a doubly bad for railroads, you know, like the Nickel Plate used to run one PA on some of their trains. And if you have one PA and you have a crankshaft problem, you're really screwed. So if you notice in this picture, this is out in New Mexico. They've got a PA and a PB, but then they've got a couple of Fairbanks Morris Erie builds in behind. So they're just in case the PAs die. I took this picture in Chicago coming out of Dearborn. It's the chief, El Capitan, and it had just a whole bunch of F units on it. So the trains to the San Francisco, we talked about the city of San Francisco, but that left in Chicago in the evening, went via Salt Lake City, and then I got to Seattle in the morning a couple days later. The San Francisco chief was number 1 on the Santa Fe. That went via Amarillo. And then we, of course, had the Cal Zephyr. That was number 17. That went via Denver, similar schedule. In 1978, Amtrak had the San Francisco Zephyr, and that went got to Denver, and then they had to go up to Cheyenne and across on the UP to Salt Lake City because Rio Grande did not join Amtrak, so they had to run on the UP. And then today, they're obviously running on the original Cal Zephyr routes, and they all get to Oakland or Emory or someplace because you have to take a bus or the BART or something to get to. Back then, you had to take a bus or the ferry to get to San Francisco. Now, here's a picture of the Rio Grande. This is the Cal Zephyr out in Colorado with Rio Grande power, and here it is in California on the Western Pacific. Lots of domes, and as I understand it, that was the train that invented the dome. So the city of San Francisco, they went 2111 miles. It was 42 hours, 22 stops. The Santa Fe chief was 49 hours because they had to go a lot further. You're going all the way down to Amarillo, Texas, and across, and then back up. The California Zephyr was 50 hours because that's further because the the Denver Rio Grande kind of wanders around Colorado, and then you have the Western Pacific that takes a longer route than the Southern Pacific. And then the Amtrak had the San Francisco Zephyr, and they go for 2410. It's a same amount, about 48 hours, and then today it's about 53 hours. Now we'll look at Los Angeles. City of Los Angeles, we talked about a little bit, goes through Salt Lake City. That's the red line on the UP. Santa Fe takes their standard old passenger main line. That's the blue. And then there was the Rock Island in the Southern Pacific that had the Golden State. And you can see the Rock Island went to Des Moines and then to Kansas City, and then it went diagonally down across to Tucumcari, in the middle of New Mexico there, and they connected with the Southern Pacific. And then they went from there down to El Paso and then west. And so I took this picture in Raton Pass on the old passenger main, but it's about a 3% grade. So he was coming downhill, not too fast. And this is the Chief El Capitan. And here you see it in Raton, New Mexico. Now this is the paint scheme for the Golden State. It was red on top and kind of light gray on the bottom, or silver. And here it is leaving Chicago. They had the Rock Island used the regular units. So the city of Los Angeles would leave in the evening and go via Salt Lake City. The Golden State was number 3 on the Rock Island, and that was left in the afternoon, went via Tucumcari, Arizona. The Super Chief left in the evening, and Amtrak today leaves in the late afternoon. So this is in Wyoming, and you can see there are several of the city's trains going through there on the UP. So distance-wise, the city of Los Angeles went 2299, and it was 40 hours. The Rock Island Golden State was 44 hours. They had to go further because, of course, you have to go way down to the southern border of the United States, and it's a bit out of the way. 23, 24. The Super Chief, that was always very impressive. It was always 39 and a half hours. So that was a fast train. And Amtrak still is doing pretty well. In 78, it was 40 hours, and now it's 43 hours. But given all the freight traffic, that's still very impressive. Oh, what? Come on. Having trouble here. Here's a picture of the city of everything in coming through Nebraska later on in the 60s. And then the Milwaukee bought FP45s because their F units were pretty beaten up. They'd gotten them early, and they'd really run them hard because they hadn't really planned on running all the UP trains. And so they bought these 5 FP45s. It's basically an SD45 with a cowl on it. The Santa Fe had them, and the Burlington, no, let's see, Santa Fe had them as well. But the people say, well, why did they buy them right before Amtrak? Well, in 1968, nobody had any idea Amtrak was actually going to happen. So the Milwaukee was planning ahead. They thought they were going to be running passenger trains for a long time. So here we see Amtrak during the freight days. Those are the San Francisco peaks in Arizona, and we see it's being pulled by 2 F40s. We'll talk more about those.